Elmer McCurdy, a Wild West outlaw, robbed a passenger train in Oklahoma in 1911, believing it was carrying thousands of dollars worth of gold bars for banks in the state. He hoped to escape with a hefty loot. Unfortunately for him, the train was carrying no gold, and to make matters worse, McCurdy managed to escape with only $46 from the robbery. As if that wasn't bad enough, Oklahoma police tracked him down just days later, ending his short-lived criminal career. But this was just the beginning of the strange story. The doctors who examined McCurdy's body preserved it with a standard arsenic treatment. His embalmed corpse was later sold to a traveling carnival, where promoters hoped to profit from McCurdy's notoriety as an outlaw. They toured with his body, displaying it at various fairs as a sideshow attraction for the next 6 decades. McCurdy's body was bought, sold and passed around between various county fairs across the Midwest. Haunted houses and wax museums even joined the bizarre market, with his corpse changing hands multiple times. After more than 60 years of traveling and earning far more than he ever stole in life, McCurdy's long-dead body ended up in a funhouse in Long Beach, California. In 1976, during filming for, McCurdy's body was used as a prop. While being handled, a finger fell off, catching the attention of the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. After conducting tests, they confirmed the body's identity. McCurdy, who had died over 65 years earlier in Oklahoma, was finally laid to rest. His remains were returned to the Wild West, and he was buried at the famous Boot Hill Cemetery in Dodge City, Kansas. What do you think of this bizarre story? Feel free to share your thoughts. It's easy to imagine the Wild West as a chaotic place when it comes to guns. After all, the wild tales of that era often revolve around outlaws carrying pistols and rifles, engaging in shootouts, robberies, highway holdups, and even daring train heists. Gunfights were at the center of it all, right? But in reality, gun control in the West was more stringent than you might think. In some ways, even stricter than today. Frontier towns like Deadwood, Dodge City, Abilene Garden City, and even Tombstone required visitors to surrender their firearms upon entering town limits. The rules in most of these places mandated that travelers visit the local sheriff's office and hand over their guns when they entered town. The sheriff would then provide them with a token representing the weapon they temporarily gave up. In that sense, the Wild West had an early version of coat checks, specifically for weapons. There was, however, an exception to these strict gun control measures: the locals. If you were a well-known resident of the town and had a relationship with the sheriff, it was customary for you to be allowed to keep your gun at home. Essentially, after years of lawlessness and rampant robberies, sheriffs wanted to ensure that out-of-town strangers weren't carrying weapons as they passed through. However, residents were allowed to be armed for personal safety and to protect their families. All in all, gun control on the frontier was much more tightly regulated than you might imagine. What do you think about this? Feel free to share your thoughts. One of the true legends of the Old West, Buffalo Bill Cody, was not only a celebrated soldier and buffalo hunter, but also a master of self-promotion, which helped cement his fame. His exploits were chronicled in books, magazines, and newspapers, and he even recreated them on stage, launching his own Wild West show in 1883. The outdoor spectacle featured hundreds of actors, among them sharpshooter Annie Oakley and Native American leader Sitting Bull. The show reenacted buffalo hunts, stagecoach robberies, thrilling horseback riding stunts and gunfights. Buffalo Bill's Wild West show made him a global celebrity, and even Queen Victoria declared herself a fan. The Pony Express was born at a time when it could take months for letters to reach the far reaches of the American West. However, this mail service shocked the nation by drastically reducing delivery times, cutting them down to just 10 days. Between April 1860 and October 1861, the Pony Express connected St. Joseph, Missouri with Sacramento, California during the Gold Rush era when California's population exploded. With California having just joined the Union in 1850, fast mail wasn't just a luxury, it became a vital necessity. The Overland California and Pikes Peak Express quickly took on the task thanks to the ingenuity of three enterprising businessmen, William H. Russell, Alexander Majors, and William B. Waddell. They recognized that stagecoaches were too slow, so they made a bold change. Instead of using wagons, they replaced them with brave riders on horseback, making mail delivery much faster and far more thrilling as riders galloped through rugged, untamed lands. The Pony Express revolutionized communication, bringing people closer together during one of the most exciting times in U.S. history. At a time when the average worker earned only $20 to $30 a month, Pony Express riders were paid $100 to $150, not to mention lodging and food expenses. The service started as a private venture, and its owners hoped to land a profitable government contract. But that never happened. With the advent of the first transcontinental telegraph line in October 1861, the Pony Express ceased most of its operations. However, the legend of the lone Pony Express rider galloping across the western frontier to deliver mail lives on to this day. If anyone ever thought that sharpshooting was a male-dominated field, they couldn't be more wrong. Over a century ago, in the United States, Annie Oakley became the first female superstar, known for her impeccable shooting skills. Born in 1860 in rural Darke County, Ohio, Oakley had a natural talent for shooting. She helped support her family by hunting in a nearby forest and selling game to a local store. By the age of 15, she was already an accomplished hunter, earning enough money to pay off her family's debts. In 1884, Oakley caught the eye Images of racehorses, gunfights and cowboy hats are all iconic symbols of the Wild West, a period in history when life in the untamed frontier was governed by strange and peculiar laws. It was a time when locals faced dangerous outlaws like Billy the Kid and Jesse James on a daily basis. This was an era where shocking events were the norm, events that could leave one in awe or disbelief. Photos of prisoner executions, countless stacks of buffalo skulls, or women kneeling before their husbands would stir strong reactions from many. Yet in the wilderness of the Old West, these images were considered entirely ordinary. Let's explore 20 fascinating photos of life in the Wild West, a time that remains one of the most wild and strange periods in United States history. In the early 1900s, there was a tradition followed by Western women during the New Year. They would kneel before their husbands, asking for forgiveness for past mistakes. A black and white photograph captures a wife kneeling at her husband's feet in a small, cozy home with a crackling fire in the hearth. In the warm glow of the winter season, the wife hopes for a fresh start in the new year. This blend of humility and tradition reflects the strong gender roles of the time, where women, even in the Wild West, were still confined to societal expectations that limited their freedoms. In the 1800s, it was extremely rare for women to drink in saloons alongside men in the eastern United States. However, as you moved west, beyond the values of the Puritans, women began to blend in with the men. Some of these women would frequent seedy bars to offer adult services while looking for customers. Others were saloon girls who entertained and served drinks to men, making their living through tips. These women would light up the room with their presence, singing, dancing, and conversing with male patrons to encourage them to spend more at the bar. According to Legends of America, saloon girls could earn as much as $10 a week, equivalent to about $25 in 1870, and receive commissions from the drinks they sold. Saloon life was central to social life, especially in places like Utah, where saloons weren't just places to drink, but the heartbeat of the community, where, honestly, anything could happen. Public executions in the Wild West often drew large, noisy and excited crowds. Vendors rushed to sell snacks and drinks to eager onlookers, all hoping to get a glimpse of the gruesome spectacle. Though these executions were intended to serve as a deterrent to crime, they quickly morphed into macabre shows, drawing the attention of the masses. However, the truth behind it was a weak legal system full of mistakes. Many innocent people faced the death penalty after unfair trials, and in some cases people who had not committed a crime met an unjust fate. Additionally, minorities, especially African Americans, were often punished more severely than whites, reflecting the cruel injustice of the era. Despite these inherent injustices, public executions were coldly accepted until they were outlawed in the late 20th century, leaving behind a dark legacy that still haunts us today. While the shadows of the hangings gradually faded, the spotlight turned back to the legends of the Wild West. One of the most prominent figures of this era was Billy the Kid, whose mysterious and deadly persona sparked endless speculation, including whether he was left-handed or simply a master of deception. It's perhaps no surprise that the food in the Wild West was, well, pretty terrible. Breakfast might have been an exception, with cornbread, stews, boiled eggs, fried potatoes, and scrambled eggs among the more appetizing dishes. Dinner, however, could include a cow's head, boiled mutton, or even pickled cow's feet. For dessert, you might have pudding. Beans were one of the most important staples of Wild West cuisine. This was typical fare for a frontier family in 1853. Cooking was simple, often done over an open flame, with a stove, frying pan, or skewers. Meals were restricted to whatever meat or vegetables were available at the time of year. Cowboys typically ate canned beans, rock-hard biscuits, jerky, dried fruit, and coffee. A famous photograph from 1892 shows a man proudly standing next to a massive pile of bison skulls in Michigan, evoking a chilling sense of loss. At the time, the United States was home to an estimated 60 million bison. These majestic creatures weren't just part of the natural landscape. They were a vital resource for Native American tribes, providing food, clothing, and shelter for generations. Bison represented strength and courage for many indigenous peoples. However, by the early 1800s, an estimated 10 to 30 million bison roamed across the American landscape. By the beginning of the 20th century, fewer than 1,000 bison remained. They were ruthlessly slaughtered, with most being killed by individuals authorized by the United States Army or by the Army itself. Bison were a critical source of sustenance and hides for Native Americans, but by the 1830s, the US government sought to wipe them out. By 1889, the bison population had dwindled to just 256 in captivity. Today, the bison population has rebounded to an estimated 150,000 to 200,000. What do you think of this photo? Share your thoughts below. You might not know it from typical Hollywood westerns, but it's estimated that 1 in every 4 cowboys was black. African-American cattle herders moved to Texas with enslaved people, who later took on the responsibility of tending cattle while their owners fought in the Civil War. After the abolition of slavery, newly freed black cowboys became highly sought after. One of the most famous African-American heroes of the Old West was Bass Reeves, the first United States Deputy Marshal west of the Mississippi River. Reeves captured over 3,000 criminals during his 3-decade career. What do you think about this? Feel free to share your thoughts below. Jesse James may be one of the few people who never found peace, even in death. After a tumultuous life filled with bank robberies and chaos across the Wild West, Jesse attempted to settle down on his farm in Kearney, Missouri. However, in 1882, after a failed attempt to avenge an old rival, he was assassinated, bringing his stormy life to an abrupt end. To prevent his grave from being desecrated, his family buried him right in the front yard of their home. Ironically, this plan backfired. News of Jesse James's burial site spread like wildfire, attracting the curiosity of the public and grave robbers alike. What was meant to be a final resting place quickly turned into a gathering spot for those seeking to either explore or loot the grave. But the story of Jesse James didn't end there. In 1948, a man named J. Frank Dalton appeared, claiming to be the surviving Jesse James. Dalton's story grew even more baffling when he convinced a court to recognize him and allow him to reclaim the infamous outlaw's name. At the age of 101, Dalton spun an unbelievable tale, and when he died in Granbury, Texas, his grave became a strange tourist attraction. However, the mystery didn't end there. Many years later, scientists exhumed Jesse James's grave in Kearney for testing, confirming that the remains indeed belonged to him. Dalton's absurd claims were debunked, but the legend of Jesse James lived on, with Granbury continuing to be tied to the myth of the outlaw's final resting place. The cowboy, the quintessential symbol of the Wild West, is often associated with the iconic wide-brimmed cowboy hat. However, here's a lesser-known fact. The hats we typically see in Western movies are not what real cowboys actually wore at the time. Instead, the most popular hats among real cowboys were derby hats, also known as bowler hats. The famous Stetson hat, which we now associate with cowboys, didn't even exist until 1865 and didn't become widely popular until the late 19th century. So, what did real cowboys wear? If you look at photos of the Wild Bunch Gang from 1892 to 1900, you'll see infamous outlaws like Harry Longabaugh, also known as the Sundance Kid, Ben Kilpatrick, Robert Leroy Parker, better known as Butch Cassidy, Harvey Logan and Will Carver, all sporting stylish derby hats. Even Bat Masterson, the famed gunfighter and gambler, was a big fan of the derby. The classic cowboy hat we know today may be iconic, but in the Wild West, the bowler hat was the real cowboy's choice. The construction of the Transcontinental Railroad is a dark chapter in American history, particularly for the Chinese laborers who worked under grueling conditions. These workers labored tirelessly for long hours, earning only $1 a day, less than half the wages their white counterparts received. This wage gap not only highlighted economic injustice, but also underscored the racism and discrimination they faced in the workforce. While white workers enjoyed higher wages, better living conditions, and sufficient provisions, Chinese laborers were forced to set up camps in harsh, isolated areas, scavenging for food and supplies while enduring discrimination from both their employers and fellow workers. Many Chinese immigrants came to the United States in search of a better life, only to find themselves enduring severe mistreatment. They were often referred to as coolies, a derogatory term that reflected the deep-seated prejudices they encountered daily. Despite their exploitation, Chinese railroad workers played a crucial role in building the railroad that connected the East and West, paving the way for the future of America's infrastructure. One notable figure from the Wild West was Dr. C, a pioneer in medicine, particularly in the treatment of scoliosis. At a time when a broken bone could permanently change a person's life, Dr. C introduced a groundbreaking solution. A striking photograph captures him working diligently in his office, examining a patient's spine using a unique device he'd invented, a distinctive metal brace. This brace was a revolutionary invention designed to correct abnormal spinal curves, providing relief for those suffering from scoliosis. Dr. C's medical work marked a significant advancement in orthopedic care, proving that even in the rugged environment of the Wild West, progress and innovation could emerge. The California Gold Rush, from 1848 to 1849, is one of the most iconic events of the Old West. When James Marshall struck gold at Sutter's Mill in Northern California, it sparked a mass migration of people from around the world, all hoping to strike it rich. Other gold rushes soon followed, igniting a thirst for gold that spread like wildfire. Thousands of miners, driven by dreams of wealth and fortune, left behind their families and homes to dig deep into the untamed wilderness. The air was filled with energy and excitement as determined prospectors shoveled dirt, hoping to uncover gold beneath the earth. But searching for gold wasn't just a treasure hunt, it was an epic adventure where dreams were built on hard work and courage. A striking photograph from the era captures a group of miners standing shoulder to shoulder, their weathered faces glowing with determination after a long day of digging for whatever gold they could find. In 1855, Secretary of War Jefferson Davis allocated $33,000 to import camels from the Mediterranean and the Middle East for military use in transporting supplies. By 1857, the U.S. Camel Corps had about 75 camels stationed at Camp Verde, Texas. Camels proved efficient in hauling heavy materials across the harsh desert terrain. One group even traveled 1,200 miles from Texas to a fort in Los Angeles. However, the Civil War put an end to the experiment, and many of the camels were auctioned off. Some found work in circuses, mines, and railroad construction projects, while others escaped and roamed freely in the Southwest for years. In fact, sightings of wild camels in Texas, Arizona, and California continued well into the 20th century. You might think it was easy to walk into a saloon in the Wild West and enjoy a fine glass of whiskey, but the reality was far from glamorous. In fact, you might be puking in your glass before you even finished your drink. Whiskey back then had names like 40 rods, because that was the distance you could walk before collapsing after drinking it. This whiskey was so strong that it could knock a man out instantly. Saloons offered a variety of alcoholic beverages, from beer to wine, but some concoctions were outright dangerous. For example, there was a drink called tarantula juice, which contained strychnine, a real poison. Historian C.W. Beers explained that the name came from the horrifying hallucinations it caused. Drinkers felt like tarantulas were crawling all over them. Definitely not the way you'd want to end a party. Other dangerous ingredients found in Wild West liquor included turpentine, used as paint thinner, tobacco oil, highly toxic, glycerin and sulfuric acid. There were no regulations on what could be sold as whiskey. Anything could be added to make it stronger or cheaper. Can you imagine taking a sip of that? We've explored 20 things that were considered normal in the Wild West. Which one impressed you the most? Or do you know any other strange facts about the Old West? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. See you in the next video.